All right. So let's talk about UFC Vegas 83, which went down just moments ago in the UFC Apex in Las Vegas. Had a full fight card of, I believe, 11 fights. And the whole, thing that happened with having this event in Shanghai, the event was canceled, moved over to the Apex. A lot of the fights, mainly the Road to UFC fights, canceled or postponed. Then they had to throw together a couple other fights to try and fill it out. Really odd situation. Definitely not ideal. I've mentioned this before, but the Shanghai event was canceled merely just because of some bureaucratic kind of permit kind of stuff. I'm sure there's a bigger story than just that I don't fully understand, especially as to why the UFC was so confident that they were going to have no issues holding the event in Shanghai. But man, all I can say is hopefully next year they figure this out. Hopefully next year there's, they're able to sort things out well in advance, dot all the I's, cross all the T's months in advance so that they don't have to cancel things at the last moment. Although the two events this year that were canceled in Asia, both in South Korea and China, canceled for totally different reasons. First one in Korea was canceled because of not being able to find a main event. This one in Shanghai, nothing to do with the card, ticket sales, more with the kind of bureaucratic behind the scenes stuff. But so let's talk about this card. I took notes on the fights, and I can kind of share my screen here and show you the results from the event. Overall, I wouldn't say it was like the most memorable event that I've watched. And I think there's a couple factors behind that. I think there's some of the like last minute notice kind of things. I think that a lot of these fights would have been a lot better in front of a live crowd where there's, a chip on a lot of these fighters to impress and pull off memorable, noteworthy performances. So, it is what it is. They made the best with what they had. And so I don't think the UFC or the fighters are at fault here if the main event or the rest of the event felt a little bit flat. At least it did to me. I mean, there were definitely standout performances. I'm going to get to those. So here's just kind of an overview of the results from the event. Talita Alankar beating Rayana Amanda by split decision. Tetsuro Taira getting a nice TKO. Luana Santos getting unanimous decision over Stephanie Egger. That was a close fight. Steve Garcia looked amazing. Violent finish over Makizo Costa. Park Hyun Sung, maybe the MVP of the event for me, to be honest, if not Kevin Jousset. He looked amazing in a unanimous decision win. Andre Muniz, airtight split decision win over Park Jun-young, Iron Turtle. Tim Elliott coming in clutch on a few days' notice, getting the arm triangle choke over Sumudarji. Nasrat Haqparast looked nasty and fast and powerful in a first-round TKO over Jamie Malarkey. Khalil Roundtree versus Anthony Smith. That was a good fight. Finished Smith off with a uppercut and left hook combination. And then you see it in the main event. Song Yadong wins a unanimous decision over Chris Gutierrez. The judges' scorecards on the fight were 2 50-45s and 1 50-44, meaning every judge scored every round for Song, and one judge scored a 10-8 round. I'd have to see the scorecards to see which round that was. I personally didn't score any 10-8s. I didn't feel like the damage was ever enough to warrant that, but maybe someone can make that argument. All right, so there is that. What can you say about the event? So the first fight, Talita Alankar versus, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on all these fights, but just a few comments here and there. And if you have any questions or comments or reactions to what I have to say, you can throw those in the chat, and I'll get to those in a second. Amanda versus Alankar, this is a fight that was kind of thrown together last minute just a couple weeks ago when the event was moved from Shanghai to Vegas. Honestly, I was chatting with some people on Twitter about this, about, the UFC, could they make an atomweight division? they technically could. I think it would probably be about as strong as bantamweight. But Rayana Amanda, she is a career atomweight moving up to strawweight to side at the UFC. She's the former Invicta atomweight champion. She was just before she signed with the UFC. And I think if she was fighting at atomweight, she would be a killer. But against stronger opponents like Talita Alencar, much shorter, stockier, but I think a lot more muscly for at least from what I can tell. But yeah, man, I personally scored the fight 29-28 for Rayana Amanda. I felt like she did a little bit more damage, and I felt, I don't know, it wasn't a great fight. Again, it's a short notice fight, not a lot of time to prepare. Both women fighting in their UFC debut under short notice. So it's just kind of a weird situation. I do wish that, I don't know if the UFC should make an atomweight division now. I don't know if now's the right time, maybe in like a year or so. I think if they were to make one now, it'd be a little bit thin. I think they could probably sign like 20 fighters to that division. And I think there's probably like 10 active UFC strawweights that would love to move down. I need to look through and just see like how many of them are former atomweights. That time is probably come and gone for like Michelle Watterson, as she has fought at strawweight for a long time now. But she used to be an atomweight. Jessica Panay used to be an atomweight. Loma Luke Bumi fought in an atomweight prior to the UFC. There's several more, and I think some of those fighters, I don't know if they would move down now that they've kind of filled out a little bit more for 115, but you could do it. And I even suggested on Twitter, like, let's have an 8-woman atomweight Grand Prix to decide the first champion. I think that'd be really cool. Do something a little bit different for the UFC to add some intrigue behind introducing a new weight class. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, probably it would be about as strong as bantamweight, which people typically say is about the weakest division in the UFC. So maybe this is not the right time now. There's no one in atomweight right now that really just like stands out as a world beater or a super electric personality. So the UFC may also be kind of waiting for that to happen too. But yeah, kind of my thoughts on that. Anyways, let's get to the next one. That was so Tatsuro Taira versus Carlos Hernandez. Man, the UFC is really, I have to hand it to them. They have really been extremely patient with Taira's development. They have not rushed him along. They have given him very, I would say for his skill level, very manageable fights thus far. And after probably the last 2 or 3 fights, we've been saying, okay, maybe it's time to give someone ranked, but he hasn't got that. But he was totally dominant in this fight against Carlos Hernandez. Looked really good on the mat, just totally. I mean, you watch this guy grapple, and he's just effortless. When he got up after the first round, after grappling the whole round, didn't even look like he was breathing heavy at all, or sweaty. Really heavy on top, very efficient in his grappling, super impressive on the ground. And myself included, have often wondered, like, okay, yeah, great grappler, good submissions, but does he have the striking to hang with a lot of the other guys? Does he have just like the raw strength to be able to hold up against some of the division's really good wrestlers? Some of those questions are yet to be answered, but he did finish the fight with a pretty nice combination, starting on the feet and then finished with punches on the ground. So definitely has hands. Taira has hands, and he can finish guys with those hands. So some of those questions I think are answered, and because of that, I think now it's worth giving him a step up. He called out Muhammad Makayev. It's weird that Makayev was like, oh yeah, if Alex Perez drops out, then you're totally in. I guess Perez has dropped out of a lot of fights, but it's kind of weird to already be like having that in our minds. Anyways, I think Makayev is a couple levels further along than Taira, but they're both so young. So honestly, why not? And they're both coming along really slowly. So if that fight happens, why not? Otherwise for Tyra, I'd love to see him fight like a Steven Erceg. Wouldn't that be fun? That'd be awesome. Erceg, I think he is ranked at number 12 right now. Doesn't have a fight. Put him on this this February pay-per-view card, 298. It's got a lot of Australian, New Zealander guys on it. It's perfect. Put Tyra versus Erceg on UFC 298. Put it up there on like the ESPN prelims. That would be perfect. I feel like the UFC would be knocking it out of the park if they booked that fight. Let's see. Tyra looked good, 15-0. Who else do we have on these prelims? We had Edgar versus Santos. Not a whole lot to say about that fight. Not a great fight. It's hard to know how much weight, no pun intended, how much weight to give to a fight that is on short notice and someone misses weight. And then the fight ends up being really close. It's like, yeah, this is up a weight class for them, bantamweight versus flyweight. I scored the fight for Luana Santos, and yeah, not much to say about that. It is what it is. Not a great show. I do think that Santos, like, eventually she could become something. Maybe get a ranking next to her name. She just keeps building up slowly. But Stephanie Egger is an experienced, really good fighter, really good judo fighter. And Santos, even though she did miss weight, she outweighed her. I thought that she at least looked strong and was able to like assert her strength over Egger in the clinch. So not much to say about that fight. I don't think much of us really love that fight. Okay. Shift to pace. Steve Garcia versus freaking Maikizo Costa. That was a really cool fight, right? Like, the first round was a little bit closer, but then Steve Garcia just like hits a switch and just totally just like explodes and gets the finish. Real nasty elbows in round 2. What is so impressive about that fight to me, and what is so impressive about Steve Garcia, a couple fights ago, he was, I don't know, just kind of struggling along. And then he drops down to bantamweight, and he had that great, really intense fight with Shailan. And then which he won by TKO. And then he has this fight with Costa, which was supposed to happen last week in Austin. But he was too sick to fight. So just last week, Steve Garcia, too sick to fight. Even if you do feel better, there's no, I mean, your rhythm, you have this like on-ramp to a fight, the weight cut, warm-ups, peaking, all these things. Even if you push the fight back 1 week, all of that is thrown off. You spent a couple days the week before just trying to recover, trying to heal, and then yeah, you're fighting a week later. There's got to be a lot of things that are kind of thrown off. It's in a totally different location, the Apex versus a large audience, much larger audience in Austin, Texas. So, the first round was a little bit kind of a warm up round for Garcia, but then I think he's a really violent dude. Yeah, really impressive from Steve Garcia. Yeah, I see that. Thanks, Jimmy. If it's no worries, I can handle it from here. However long you want to stay on there, appreciate that. But yeah, Garcia, I'd love to see him step up. He called out Nate Landwehr after his fight. I mean, really, there's a lot of fighters that would be exciting against Nate Landwehr because he's always in good fights. But yeah, I would love that. I would love to see Nate Landwehr versus Steve Garcia. I think Garcia is probably really underestimated so far. I think they're gonna start showing him a little more respect in the matchmaking for sure. Okay, maybe my MVP of the night was Park Hyung-sung, a extremely under the radar, very unassuming Korean flyweight. Does not have this like really intense physicality. Does not have this really like mean mugging demeanor. Nickname is Peace of Mind. Walks out to freaking Coldplay, like about as mild and almost like vanilla appearing as you can get. But man, did he look on point. His striking, his grappling, everything looks so good. His accuracy, his shot selection, carrying the fight to the ground and then just floating on top and going from position to position, nearly trying to get the submission win at the end of the first round by rear naked choke. Shannon Ross has probably like twice as many fights as Park. So, he's an experienced guy. He's a lot older than Park, but man, just so impressed with Park. If I'm giving out performance bonuses, I'm totally throwing one his way. But yeah, then he in the second round, he's punching, he's kicking, and then he throws like the body kick, and kind of Ross doesn't have a huge reaction, but you can tell he's starting to kind of lower his guard. And then Park throws the punch to the liver. Ross crumbles and then finishes off with some ground punches. Really, really impressive showing from Park. Can't say that enough. Honestly, guys, and I talked about this in my preview video for this event, there are, like right now, Korea is not a huge like powerhouse in the UFC. Make no mistake, I mean, you've got Iron Turtle, you've got Jung Da-eun, you've got Sting, Choi Sung-woo, and then now you've got Park. But in I would say 2 years, there are going to be like a lot of really good Korean fighters in the UFC, both that are in the UFC right now, some that are about to be. I'm talking about like Lee Chong-ho, and then probably another wave of fighters. I mean, good Lord, there were like a couple Koreans this morning that fought and won at AFC. That looked really good. Ko Suk-hyun, he's a 10-2 middleweight. Really impressive this morning. Song Yadong, a 5-0-1 featherweight, won the AFC title this morning. A lot of stuff to like. And also Kim Song-wook, who fought on Road to UFC, breezed through Arvind Chan this morning to win the welterweight title for AFC. I could go on and on. Yoo-soo Young, maybe Park Chan-soo in a couple years. Mentioned Lee Chong-ho. So many more. If I just thought for like 10 more seconds, I could give you 5 or 6 more names. But all those guys going to be in the UFC in the next 2 years. Maybe a couple of those guys could be ranked. Just waiting for the Korean explosion, but it's going to happen. Korean MMA has gotten really good the last like year or two. So Park, just another example of that. But loved his fight. And then fight after that, Kevin Jousset versus Song Kanan. Really, I would say one of the more entertaining fights on the card. Both those guys just kind of stood toe-to-toe and through the whole fight. Kevin Jousset winning the unanimous decision. His jab was just on point. He was throwing so much volume. I think they said that he may have like passed the previous, I forget what the stat was, but he passed some benchmark for welterweight in terms of volume. He looked exceptional. Really, really good. I mean, Song Kanan is a guy that I think is slept on a lot because he doesn't have a lot of signature wins over high quality like higher level competition in the UFC, but he's also got a lot of knockouts. Like he could put anybody to sleep if he landed the right punch. The guy has knockout power. That is for sure. He's got, I think, 30 or so pro fights. So very experienced guy, very good opponent, really slept on. I think for Song, he just was not mobile enough. He just stood there and took way too many leg kicks, took way too many jabs, wasn't moving his head enough. I'd love to see him be a little bit more mobile, maybe move side to side a little bit more. It just seemed like he was eating way more than he should have. And that's also a credit to Kevin Jousset or Kevin Jousset. Is that how you say it? Boom. I like that one. But yeah, so that was a good fight. Kevin Jousset looked really awesome. I would love to see him in like someone said, I think it was Sean Bitter said like Trey Waters. That would be a really fun fight. Put him in fun fights. He's your fun fight guy, especially like, I don't know if the UFC is going to go back to France next year with the Olympics going on, but happy that we have another French fighter to throw on that those France cards next time we go there. So that was a good fight. Moving on to the main card. This was an interesting fight between Park Jun-young and Andre Muniz. How did you guys score this fight? This was really interesting. I felt like if I didn't really know how fights were scored, or like if I was just like, if I'm just watching this fight with like friends that maybe don't watch a lot of MMA, I feel like most of them would have probably thought Andre Muniz won the fight. But merely because of the optics, and he was controlling the fight like 95% of the time. But yeah, it's all about the damage for me. Round one was pretty clear. Damage heavily in favor of Iron Turtle. Round 3 was closer, but I felt like it was still not super debatable who did more damage, and I felt like that was Park. So I felt like Park should have taken the fight. But either way, close fight. I mean, it felt clear to me, but and it seemed like everyone that I saw like on Twitter X was saying the same thing. But I don't know. Really weird. I felt so bad for Park. I mean, he just looked so dejected after that fight. I mean, it's just gotta suck so bad being on your back that much and just being like manhandled like that. Park, he was on this 4-fight win streak, 3 finishes. He felt like this was his time fighting a guy that was in the top 15. He felt like this was his time. He's 32 years old, right in his prime. And then he loses a split decision. So all that to say, I don't think it'll set him back too far. I think they'll probably still give him like a guy that's just outside the top 15 next to middleweight, but feel for him. At the same time, Andre Muniz, like, could he have done more damage as he was grappling? Maybe. And I think we maybe wouldn't be having this conversation as much about scoring if he would do some more damage while he's grappling. But yeah, either way, a good win for him. Kind of back to the basics for Muniz. So next fight is the pain, guys, the pain. Sumu Darji versus Tim Elliott. In a way, I already like. I mean, from an entertainment standpoint, I was excited for this fight because both these guys really exciting, really fun fighters at flyweight. Flyweight, maybe my favorite division in the UFC. So I knew the fight was going to deliver in some way, but I like both of these fighters a lot. I used to train at Tim Elliott's gym. Tim Elliott is one of 2 fighters in the UFC that are from my hometown of Wichita, Kansas. And like Tim Elliott he really just like feels like someone from my hometown. I can't really put that into words. And so, I've gone to see some of Tim's fights outside the UFC in person too. And so like, I'm a fan of Tim's. I'm obviously a fan of Sumu Darji. I mean, I don't usually talk about like fighters that I'm personally a fan of a whole lot, but like, yeah, I'm rooting for the guy. He's the first Tibetan fighter in the UFC. Definitely the most successful. I guess Rong Ju is also from Tibet. He's Tibetan. So those 2. But yeah, Sumu Darji, the most successful Tibetan fighter. And so I think for that reason, among other things, his style, all that, I root for the guy. I was talking to his manager earlier this week, and he was like, man, like, we're so excited that he's back. We feel like this is his time to make a run to the top. Really pumped for this. And then he gets this opportunity fighting a short notice opponent. A lot of times when you get a short notice opponent, guy drops out, they find a replacement. Usually it's like a step down. It's hardly ever a step up. But in this case, I think the matchup was tougher. Well, it was a similar matchup. Both guys are really good grapplers, Nascimento and Tim Elliott. But Tim Elliott is I mean, he's one of the more unique fighters in the UFC. Nobody else even comes close to having his style. And he's a really good grappler, really good wrestler, but just like different in every kind of way, different in all the ways. He's just awkward. And fighting him on 5 days' notice, even as he's coming in without much preparation, Sumudarji having a full training camp, it's just hard to prepare for a guy that good. Elliott fought for a title already and fought like probably like at least half of the ranked flyweights right now. So that's just tough. And it was entertaining on the feet. Sumudarji using his range, popping Tim Elliott a couple times. But I do like the one positive for this fight for Sumudarji is I know he eventually got taken down, but his takedown defense for a while looked really sharp. Like Tim Elliott went through several attempts to try and get him down because his flexibility and his balance looked really good. And I got to give that credit to Team Alpha Male. But the thing is like Sumudarji, not a natural wrestler. When you are fighting a natural wrestler like Tim Elliott, he's just going to chain attempt after attempt after attempt at you. And he's going to throw different kinds of takedowns at you, a tree top, a double leg, a single, a trip, different things. He's going to just, and when you're not a natural wrestler, you might be able to defend the first one or two, but especially over 15 minutes of a fight, that's just like eventually he's going to get you down. Eventually he's going to get you down. So he did. And then once the fight hit the mat, then it was just like, it just went downhill really quick. One of the most just like gut-wrenching finishes, just Sumudarji like kind of leaking blood, gurgling, gasping for breath, and then gets choked unconscious. Just really like disturbing optics. And I just really feel for the guy. I felt that one emotionally. And yeah, I know he'll be back, but that is a tough fight to take on short notice, to fight someone like Tim Elliott. I mean, props to Tim Elliott. I know the guy is a workhorse. I knew that he was going to come in even on short notice in shape, because that's just the kind of lifestyle that he has. He's always training. He's always in motion. So hard, tough fight for Sumudarji. So next one, Haqparast versus Malarkey. Not a lot to say about this fight, except Haqparast looks so good. Once he exploded on Malarkey, he was fast. He was powerful. I think just like kind of a theme of this event was people just kind of exploding, thinking about Steve Garcia, even thinking about Tim Elliott, and then thinking about Nasrat Haqparast, just exploding. Tons of punches, just unanswered punches on the feet, and Malarkey crumbles. That's 3 in a row for Nasrat Haqparast. He's now apparently representing Morocco, maybe training there. And he he made a pitch to the UFC to come to Morocco a couple times in his post-fight interview. And I honestly think, like, when I think about where the UFC could go in Africa, my first thought is South Africa. I think they'll probably go to South Africa first. But the next two would be Nigeria and Morocco. Nigeria, just because of the population, it's the most populated country in Africa. But Morocco makes a lot of sense. They've got a pretty strong fan base there. A lot of connections to kickboxing. It's really close to Europe, and it's far northwest. It's like one of the better places travel-wise in terms of other fighters and personnel to get to in Africa. So I could see that. I'm not really sure what our venues are like, but I mean, why not go to Morocco? Go to Casablanca or I don't know, Marrakesh. Where else is in Morocco? Tangiers, is that now? I think that's in Morocco too. But yeah, that would be cool. I'd love to see that. Don't know if UFC is going to go to Africa this year, but Hopefully next year they will. I don't know anything about that. Co-main, Khalil Roundtree versus Anthony Smith. Loved this fight. Everything that I was hoping it would be. Really tactical fight, striking fight between these two. I mean, honestly, both of them by now are veterans. I've just like loved. It's one of the most gratifying things as a fight fan when there's like a prospect that has a lot of potential, and then but then they kind of like struggle to make it. You know, they kind of just toggle back and forth between wins and losses, but then they reach that point where they've finally matured enough to where they're like, okay, now they're having their breakthrough. Now they're having their time to shine. Everyone brings up Charles Oliveira with this, but it feels like, and there's still like, he still has to fight in the top 5, but Khalil Roundtree can't. I wouldn't consider myself like a fan in the traditional sense, but I remember watching him on Tough when he finished that fight by body kicks. A guy was like turtled on the ground and he just like rattled off body kicks to this guy's midsection. And that was one of the most like intimidating finishes I've ever seen. And so ever since then, I'm like, man, I know Khalil Roundtree. He's got that killer instinct and he's got the like speed and power, but can he round out everything else? The defense, being able to, have good shot selection, ground game, all that. Can he round out all of that? And Anthony Smith is the kind of guy, I mean, some people may call him like a gatekeeper, but he's the kind of guy where it's like, if you're not down to hang, if you're not an elite fighter, then he's going to beat you. He's going to expose you with his like veteran, I think he's BJJ black belt. He's been in over 50 fights, fought for a UFC title, had like 30 career resurgences. Probably going to have a couple more before the day's done for his career. But he looked awesome. He looked so good. Fast, really effective from that Muay Thai stance, and put Anthony Smith away with the uppercut and left hook in round 3. And man, that image, I think that's the image that stands out in my mind from this event, is Smith doing the stanky leg and then kind of tumbling backwards, and then Roundtree just like slowly walking up to him with the hammer fist in the air, which was a really classy move by him to just like hold off as long as he could. Smith was done and the stoppage was perfect. I just hope that for someone like Anthony Smith, that when it is time for him to be done, and I'm not saying that time is now. I think he still has several good fights left in him, but he's also lost a lot of fights. He's taken a lot of damage in his career. And I feel like he's like the quintessential UFC fighter, the kind of guy that will step up on half a day's notice, fight anybody, take a beating, and get back into competition as soon as he can. I just hope that he has the awareness and restraint to be able to call it a career whenever it's time. Whenever that is not now. I'm not calling for him to retire. Don't hear me say that, but just like, I do worry about Anthony Smith just as a guy that has taken a lot of damage. And hey, we all love Lionheart. He's great as an analyst. Seems like a great guy. Always in interesting fights. Has fought just about everybody. So there's nothing but respect from Anthony Smith. I think I just say that wanting his health to be protected and for him to have a good life post UFC career. But yeah, what's next for Khalil Roundtree? Eventually, the Pereira fight eventually would be a cool fight. I'd love to see him fight while Jan Blachowicz is injured. It sounds like there could be some verbal agreements in place for like Yuri versus Rakic. So I don't know who would we put against Roundtree going forward. Let me just look at my rankings here. We could do, gosh, light heavyweight is such a weird division, isn't it, guys? Kind of a, not really a division that stands out in a lot of ways, but I think that'll change. Divisions kind of come and go in terms of their interest level. Having Roundtree up there definitely helps. It adds some much needed excitement, I think, in there. I mean, there's good light heavyweight matchups, but you could put him against like a Nikita Krylov. Krylov doesn't have a fight. Honestly, that's really the only Volkan Oezdemir, Ryan Spann. Those are the guys that are ranked ahead of him. Now, Smith was ranked number 8, and Roundtree is number 11. So you got to think he's going to be 8 or 9 next week in the rankings. So when that happens, yeah, I would say Krylov or maybe Volkan Oezdemir would be interesting fights. Of those two, I'd love to see Krylov. That would be really exciting. That'd be a cool fight. I can't even remember if these guys have fought before, but all right, let's talk about this main event. Song Yadong versus Chris Gutierrez. Made about a month, 5 weeks ago. Song Yadong been preparing for a long time for someone. Thought it was Peter Yan for a little while, and then it was questioned who's gonna step in. Chris Gutierrez has a great performance against Alatong Haley, and then immediately after that performance, in the works and signed to fight Song Yadong. At first in Shanghai, now in Vegas, and going into the fight and going into the first round, I mean, I knew Gutierrez, like, his bread and butter is his leg kicks. And I love what they pointed out on the broadcast. They're like, he really, like, almost in the same way a lot of fighters will kind of use like a jab to kind of paw, measure distance, and just kind of accumulate volume, whether for an optics or for like a getting reads or measuring distance. Gutierrez almost uses that with kicks, and in a lot of ways, that's a more risk-free way of doing it because you can keep a little bit more distance of your head to your opponent. But yeah, immediately he starts doing that. He starts throwing out a lot of leg kicks, accumulating a lot of volume. If you were to give Gutierrez any round, it would have been round 1. And initially, just like on my first watch, I gave him round 1. It was close. It was kind of like, who does more damage? The guy that lands 30 leg kicks at 50% power, or the guy that lands 15 leg kicks at 80% power, which is kind of what round 1. It's like, I don't really know. I mean, whose leg hurts more at the end of the round? I don't know. But Gutierrez, really good at the leg kicks. Song throwing leg kicks of his own. And then that was really the only round like that. The rest of the fight, I felt like Song, the thing with Song that just like he's got good reflexes, he's got good vision, but I feel like he also doesn't get credited enough with his fight IQ. He makes really wise decisions throughout the course of a fight. In this fight, it didn't create the most compelling fight, but Song, like, he in round 1, it's really even. Gutierrez is getting a lot of reads, keeping things pretty even, but then Song makes some adjustments and then cleanly takes the next 4 rounds using trips, takedowns to keep Gutierrez on his back. On top, Song, he didn't do as much damage as I would have liked him to do. As the fight goes on, he throws some more elbows on the ground, but I would have loved to see him get a little bit more in there, just again for the optics, but also to I don't know, see if you can work towards a finish. It's like that was a big factor in getting the finish in the Ricky Simone fight. And I mean, I know it's easier for me to say, easier said than done. But I think that was one area I was like, yeah, I wish he would just press a little bit harder here. But Song, yeah, he is a really intelligent fighter, and he is 26 years old. But yeah, I mean, just dismantled Gutierrez. I also wonder, it seemed like there was a lot of mental stuff going on with Gutierrez. Do you guys feel that as well? I feel like there's a lot of weird stuff going on with him. There was the stuff with like the heckler in the crowd that I could tell was bothering Gutierrez. There was a couple fouls in the fight, like Gutierrez was continually grabbing the cage, sticking his finger inside the glove of Song, but he's like pushing back on that, even though like we have video evidence of him doing that. So he's kind of like, I don't know, arguing, getting testy with Herb Dean. And then, I don't know, it was like going into round 5, he sits down and his coaches are trying to pump him up, and he does not look like his head was in a good place. He sits down, he's like, oh, he elbowed me to the back of the head. Like that was what he was concentrated on. His coaches were trying to get him to focus, tell him like, yeah, he's going to try to take you down. And then right when the fight, the third round starts, what does the guy do? He goes for a freaking Imanari roll. And Song was like, okay, thanks. I guess we're going to the ground again. So I feel like Gutierrez is going to be mad at himself about this fight. Some of the decision making, some of the places that his head was at. Would this fight have been different if it was A, longer training camp for Gutierrez? Maybe. B, in front of a larger audience somewhere in Shanghai? Maybe it would have been a different performance from Song. I don't know. I have no idea, but maybe Song was thinking a little bit more like, hey, like I don't have the pressure of carrying this event in front of my home crowd. And so I'm just going to do what I need to do to get the W. Even if that means wrestling this guy and just kind of hanging out on top. But yeah, on to the next one. He calls up Peter Yan. Figueiredo also, I mean, it's kind of weird to me that like everyone thinks that everyone's calling out Peter Yan. Figueiredo also called him out. But yeah, both those fights would be great. I saw Caposa saying on Twitter, like, I mean, yeah, just have them all fight each other in succession. Sounds good to me. But otherwise, if he doesn't fight Yan, which I feel like that fight has a better chance of happening than the Figueiredo Yan fight, since the UFC already kind of put those wheels in motion for a second with Yan versus Song. I feel like it has a better likelihood of happening. If he doesn't fight Yan, though, let's see. Well, he was supposed to fight Rob Font back at UFC 292. That fight doesn't happen. Cruz, who knows what's going on with Cruz? Sounds like the UFC wants Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov. Tried to put that fight together a couple times. Honestly, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that there's like a. I mean, you got, and then other than that, you got Sterling going up to 145. Merab and Cejudo. Apparently, those guys are supposed to fight each other. So by process of elimination, Song should be fighting either Figueiredo or Yan. There's really no one else for him to fight. He's already fought Sandhagen anyways. So I would say you could expect that next for sure. Overall, the event, like I said, not like the most, I mean, last weekend's event was insane, incredible. This weekend, overall, pretty forgettable event with a couple standout performances. I'm looking up on my phone to see what who the performance bonuses were. I don't know that they're out yet. Maybe Dana should be up soon. Which I definitely would love to check out that press conference if Dana's there. Let's see what you guys had to say about this. So, I saw people saying that this was only sent to Vegas since Song versus Gutierrez was the main and not good enough to headline in China. No, that's false. It had nothing to do with the card. It was only about event permits. And I talked to people on the inside. That's what they told me. So it had nothing to do with the card. Why don't people know the truth? Well, I mean, it's awkward to talk about. The UFC, they're not going to say that on the broadcast. Well, we had some issues getting permits in Shanghai. Just kind of weird to bring up on the broadcast. So that's why you got to watch my stuff, because I give you the goods on that. Good to see you. Yeah, you too, Makoto. Did I think that Iron Turtle was robbed? 1 and 3, he cracked Muniz hard. Robbery. I am like so hesitant to use that word ever, but I'm going to use it. I'm going to say Iron Turtle was robbed because I feel like fights are won on damage, and it doesn't seem disputable who did more damage. I think Muniz only landed like 2 significant strikes in that 3rd round. So I don't know what the argument is based off of the scoring set. Damage, like that's how it's like who scores the most damage, that's who wins the round. If damage is equal or apparently equal, then you go to the net. But it's like there was no need to ever evaluate anything else because the damage was clearly for Park. So I don't know. And the weird thing was, like, you'll see those scorecards. The scorecards was like one judge gave Park round 3, but didn't give him round 1. And it felt like round 1, Park did a lot more damage. And so I don't know. I don't know what the thinking is. What's the defense of that? Were you on your phone? Were you solving today's Wordle? Like, because you should have been watching the Iron Turtle. Yeah, it's very strange. They need to stop feeling tired of these Mexicans and start giving. Well, unless you give them freaking Brandon Moreno. We got nothing against Mexicans, but I feel you. They need to move him up. Erceg is my pick for his next opponent. The thing is like, you don't want another Sage Northcutt situation. You got a really super young guy coming into the UFC, a lot of talent, really good record. You can't throw him to the wolves too quickly. Even though he's got a lot of talent in some areas, if he fights the elite, then the areas that he's missing, that he still needs to fill in because he's so young, are going to get exposed, and that can kind of mess things up in a lot of ways. Or it can just like delay someone really, like it can add a lot of zigzags to someone's career. So I agree that it's time to be done with this phase of his career. It's time to be into like ranked. Time for. I think Tyra deserves a ranking. The top 10 through 15 at flyweight is Tim Elliott 10, Sumudarji 11, Steven Erceg 12, Tagir Ulanbekov 13, who has a fight, David Dvorak 14, and Cody Durden 15, who has a fight. I feel like Tyra could take that 14 or 15 spot pretty easily. I think Tim Elliott is someone, wait on that. The thing is, flyweight is pretty booked up. Only guys in the top 15 at flyweight that don't have a fight, Kai Kara France, who I think is still recovering from injury. Matt Schnell, I heard he signed a contract. TBA on that. Don't know who that would be. Maybe he's fighting Steven Erceg. And then Tim Elliott and Sumudarji. And then Erceg and Dvorak. So I say, either Dvorak or Erceg for sure. You can speak. I didn't know you spoke Mandarin. That's cool. Xiaolanan was yelling at Sumudarji to stand up. What's she doing cornering? Just terrible. Well, stand up would have been great. Maybe some technical advice on how to stand up or how to get out of the choke would have been most helpful. Sumudarji is not Derek Lewis. He can't just stand up there. But for sure. Team Alpha Male, known for bad, that's a hot take, known for bad game plans. Why are they so highly touted for wrestling and striking? Everyone knows all they do is overhands and double legs and some takedown defense. I mean, they're good. They are good at what you just said, for sure. They are good at those things. They are good at strength and conditioning. They have really well-conditioned athletes. They have a good wrestling program. And honestly, you just kind of described Uriah Faber's style. Wrestler, overhands, double legs. That's basically Uriah Faber style. So copy that onto a bunch of other fighters. But yeah, I mean, they're a solid gym. They're definitely a solid gym. I'm actually trying to, I think this is the first time I've said this, but I'm like trying to figure out when I can get down there next year to hang out with some of the athletes. I had a timeline actually for the next couple months to do that, but I'm not that some things changed. And so, with the athlete on the athlete side, so it may not be that soon, but I'd love to get down because there's a lot of really great Asian fighters down there. Yan, Song, Sumudarji, Sumit Kumar usually trains there. Liu Kai, who I'm pretty close with, trains there. But yeah, we'll see about that. We'll see. Would you consider them an elite gym like Bong Tao or AT? I would. Yeah, I would consider them an elite gym. I mean, just by sheer volume of UFC fighters that they have, they are an elite gym. I don't know if I could say. You may have a better read on what their strengths and weaknesses are as a gym. I mean, we know fighters from there always have a good guillotine, wrestling, strength and conditioning, usually a lot of power. But I mean, no gym is perfect. Every gym has areas to grow in their coaching. So I mean, sure, Team Alpha Male is the same. You said I feel like the Asian fighters that go to Team Alpha Male are at a disadvantage due to the game planning. Maybe I'm wrong. So yeah, I'm thinking like Sumudarji for the game plan against Tim Elliott. Like if we're talking about game plan versus Tim Elliott, you have 5 days to make a game plan against a guy that is very unique and very tricky. So did they probably have some like key things for him to do? Probably. Also just utilizing your strengths. Sumudarji had a 6-inch reach advantage over Tim Elliott, and he was starting to work that a little bit as the fight was getting started. On the feet, Sumudarji looked to be handling himself pretty well against Tim Elliott. And I don't know that it was like a fight IQ game planning issue that, got him taken down and submitted. I think it may have just been like a lack of grappling knowledge that got him submitted. But really, like, I feel like you're seeing someone on Twitter, it was either Ghost, I think it was Ghost, reposted something from Open Note Grappling about how like arm triangle chokes are getting more and more popular in MMA. And they are, I mean, they are, I've seen that. I've definitely seen that in the last couple of years. And it's tough. I mean, I chalk up Sumudarji's loss, I think, more to experience on the mat than game planning. But I'm not saying you're wrong. But I mean, think about this. Song has, I don't know if it's just him, his intelligence, his own wisdom, but like he had a really good game plan against Chris Gutierrez. He took very minimal damage in that fight and pretty much cruised through the whole thing without having to like work incessant. I mean, he worked hard, but like, you know what I mean? It wasn't like a grueling, punishing fight for him where he took a lot of damage. So I don't know. I probably can't comment on. I know. I do think it's interesting when you all kind of bring that up because it is a hard thing to kind of quantify in a gym of like how they prepare a fighter strategically for fights. So I appreciate those comments for sure. Unless you all got nothing else, then I will probably bounce. But man, I think this is the first time I've done something like this after an event, and I like doing it. I'll probably do more, mainly for more like Asian centric cards, but I could do others in the future. We'll see. If this video performs really well, then I'll definitely do that. But that is it for me. Signing out. Looking forward to next week, UFC 296. Glad it feels like we don't always get these just like mega Super Bowl cards to end the year, but this one definitely feels like one that's just loaded from top to bottom. I can't wait. So I will see you on next week's podcast. If this is your first time watching this channel or watching me live, every Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, I do a live podcast, this exact same setup. And yeah. And James, I see you said, talking about Dan Ige comes in with a bad game plan in spite of his coach, Nixick, who is smart. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I appreciate that, James. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I'll see you guys next week and enjoy the fights next week before we go off to a long break